So this is Miss Davis, and this is Era 1, a review of everything that we covered in the American History first part. So as I go through, it's your study guide, it's the questions and the answers, all right? So the first question that you guys had was like, what group actually got here to the North American continent before any of our other Europeans? And the first group would be our Vikings. So over here in the Scandinavian countries, the Vikings sailed out on their longships here to like Iceland and Greenland, and they discovered those areas. And then they got here to the North American area, like Nova Scotia, Canada, and it is believed that they got into Minnesota, which is why we have the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota believes it so much that a lot of their areas and their towns and stuff have that name. They have some sort of Nordic Viking name, okay? So this was the map from your era book. So here's the Scandinavian countries. They come out here, but they don't settle. So just as quickly as the Vikings kind of rise to power in Europe, they go out. And remember, a lot of them are going to convert over to Christianity, and they get bought out by, like, Christians. You know, here's a pretty girl, marry her, settle here in Russia. And so the Vikings will eventually kind of just merge with everybody else. So when Christianity starts to really convert a lot, Vikings will eventually convert, or they marry, and they convert that way. So question 2 is, what was the Age of Exploration, also known as the Age of Discovery? It's just basically a time period when this old world right here, Europe, discovers this new world here. Okay, so this part of the globe has really not been in contact with a lot of people. After the Roman Empire fell, right there, the little boot, pretty much what you saw in Europe was kind of what we call in history the Dark Age. And it's not the Dark Age because, there was no power. They had lights. They had candle. That's their lights. But what it was it's just a period when they kind of lost a lot of their knowledge that they had under the Roman Empire. And so a lot of people are illiterate. And basically the most intelligent parts of the world there for a while were here in the Middle East and in Asia. Now, when the Age of Exploration kicks off, you're going to see this part of the globe kind of taking a back seat. And then you're going to see Europe really becoming the dominant force in the world. A long time ago, before the Age of Exploration and Discovery, you would probably find your most intelligent people here, in the Middle East and in Asia. But then when the Age of Discovery happens, after the Crusades has brought back all that lost knowledge of what life was like in the Roman Empire, and they brought back the classics, they brought back astronomy, they brought back philosophy, math, all the things that they had lost. They brought it back here from the Middle East, here to Europe. They're bringing back technology. When the Age of Discovery happens, Europe is going to become the dominant force in the world. And so now there is no isolation. This half of the globe will be connected with this half of the globe. And this little place, Europe, is pretty much going to dominate politics in the world for a really long time. So the next question that you had was, what was the time frame for the Age of Exploration? 1400s to 1500s. Remember, Christopher Columbus sails the ocean blue in 1492. But really, the Age of Exploration is before Columbus. It's just like he kind of kicks it in the high gear. Remember, Portugal's already started their school of navigation with Prince Henry the Navigator, and he started it a while ago. So you have Portugal out there. They're just not coming to the New World, this half of the globe, okay? And really, remember, the reason why this is all going to happen is because they have better ships, they have better sails, they have compasses, they have better technology, they have better maps. The next question that you guys had was about diffusion. It is just simply the transfers of ideas, culture, technology, etc. from one group to the next. So in class I had you guys imagine, some sort of tradition that you have in your family. It could be a holiday tradition. It could just be, this is how we do things in our family, okay? So normally around the holidays is really when you see a culture transfusion. At the holidays, you decorate this way. Your grandmother did it. Your great-grandmother did it. It's something that has passed down from generation to generation. So diffusion is just the transferring of it. Now this can happen from generation to generation. It can happen from group to group. So when we look at diffusion, we look at what happened with the Crusades. So those Christian knights, they went to the Middle East. They got a lot of Middle Eastern technology. They brought it back to Europe. That is the transfer of technology from one group to the next. The next question that you guys had is, give an example of diffusion in relation to the age of discovery. So this can be anything. Anything that happens from Europe to the New World, or New World to Europe. So think Columbian Exchange. Lots of diffusion along those lines. So when you look at language is diffusion. So when you look at Spain, okay, they speak Spanish, and here's South America, and you look at all these like kind of orange coral color countries right there, they're all speaking Spanish. Okay, that's cultural diffusion. Portugal, okay, they speak Portuguese. They took Brazil, and that's why they speak that. So that's cultural diffusion. You do have a couple other countries, but really we're going to focus on Spain and Portugal here in the South American area. And then when you look at like the native languages of North America, here's a pretty good map. You'd have to blow it up. But there are tons of different languages, and then as time goes on, not so many. Okay. So how did the Protestant Reformation contribute to colonization? So remember, the Christians, they're all Catholic if they're in that part of Europe. Okay, so you do have other faiths. You have the Orthodox faith, but we're not going to get into that. That's before this course. But what has happened is some people are getting upset with the Catholic Church. There's a lot of corruption going on in the church, and that was really bad back then if you're a Christian. The Pope is the keeper of the keys to heaven. Okay, so like he says who gets in and who gets out. Basically, he can unlock the key, unlock the door, and you get into heaven. And if he says no, then you don't get to go. Okay, so if your Pope is having issues of morality, and your church leaders, your priests, your cardinals are having moral issues, that's really bad for you, a Christian, because they're supposed to be telling you how to be a good Christian so you can get into heaven. And so one guy, Martin Luther, is going to write a 95 thesis. It's 95 complaints that he has against the Catholic Church, and he is a monk. So he is actually one of the church leaders. And that's how the Protestant Reformation begins. People within the Catholic Church start protesting practices of the church, and it just kind of sweeps through Europe like wildfire. And that is why they're called Protestants. They're protesters. Okay, so if you look at the word protest, they're just protesting. Now, how it contributes to colonization is when you look at all this, this is what you're going to start to see here in Europe, all these different types of faith. Whatever your king is what you have to be. So if you're a Catholic in England, once England converts over to the Protestant faith, it's going to be the Church of England or the Anglican faith right here. What happens if you're not and you're a Catholic is you could die, okay? And in different parts there are going to be people burned alive for their faith. So if you can remember 5 years ago when some upheaval happened and a leader said, we're going to kill all the Catholics, and you are a Catholic, you might want to get out of England. And it'll be the same thing for the different little faiths. If you're not a part of the Anglican Church, or if you had an issue with the Anglican Church, you might want to leave that church and leave the country. So back then, whatever your king was is what your faith is going to be. And if you're anything different, it would be better just to come here to the New World for religious freedom for your group and your group only. You're not coming over here to give religious freedom to everybody. You just want to be able to practice your own faith, your own religion, without any interference from the crown or from your government. Okay? So the next question that we're going to look at is, how did the Renaissance contribute to exploration? So the Renaissance, remember, is just a rebirth of ancient knowledge from the Greeks and the Romans. So we lost all this information once the Roman Empire falls. The East, the Middle East, and Asia had kept it for us, and they had translated a lot of it. It's why we have all the knowledge we do have on a lot of things. But once we get that stuff back, it allows Europe to regain lost knowledge. They start thinking differently about the world, and they start challenging things. They start challenging the church, the Catholic Church. And that really leads to that Protestant Reformation. And you can see it in artwork. Here's before. It's not as detailed, not as human looking, okay, not as in depth as you see during the Renaissance. Okay. So you guys study that more in world, and that's okay, but just think about how artwork looks like in medieval Europe to how it looks during the Renaissance. You're talking about some of the greatest masterpieces in the world happening. Think Mona Lisa. That's Renaissance, okay? So the next question is 14th century. So, what does it mean? It means 1300. So remember, whenever we're talking about centuries, we're talking about 100 years. So if we're talking about the 14th century, we're talking about the years 1300 to 1399. Just remember, always -1, okay, from that number up here, and that's the years. Okay, that's the easiest way to do it. Now, question 9 was a little bit more complicated because you had to look at explorers and their achievements. So this is the easiest way for me to do it. Remember, Diaz, he sells for Portugal, and he's going to sell to the Indian Ocean. That's what he wants to do. Now, remember, he is going to actually kind of stop. He doesn't go all the way. So he goes around the Cape of Good Hope, and he's like, oh, there's the Indian Ocean, and then he backtracks it. Da Gama is also going to sell for Portugal. He actually gets to India, and he establishes trade. And Portugal, because of these two guys, are really going to light the fire of exploration. Now the neighbor Spain is actually getting a little jealous, and they're going to start actually figuring out that they need to get in on this game of exploration, and so are the other countries. Magellan is the guy who is going to circumnavigate. That means he circles the globe, so he circles the world. He sells for Portugal. Columbus is going to sell for Spain, and he discovered the New World. Okay, Vespucci is going to get American named after him. And so you just need to know that. So Amerigo Vespucci, and it's just named for him. So Cortez is Spanish, and he is going to conquer the Aztecs. Pizarro is Spanish. He's going to conquer the Incans. And remember, when I'm putting Spanish, this is who they sell for. Okay. And then De Soto is going to sell for Spain. He gets here to the North American area and to the Mississippi River and Florida area. So he actually gets into the North American continent. Cartier is French, and he is the guy who actually names Canada, and he discovers the St. Lawrence River. Champlain is another French explorer, and he's going to found Quebec, which is Canada. And remember the map that we did on our interactive notebook, page 4. So as we did the map, we colored and we labeled. So this is a really good map to go back to and look. And if you're missing something, here you go. Okay. 10. Why is Columbus's landing in the Americas one of the great turning points of history? Remember, a turning point is when a significant change occurs. So a significant change has occurred. It kicks off the Spanish exploration of the Americas. And once Spain gets on it, everybody else gets on it. And so that's going to permanently change the New World. That is why it's a significant turning point. Turning points aren't good or bad, okay? They have a mixture, okay? So it's really hard in history to say this is good or this is bad. There is a mixture, okay? So when this happens, the New World gets stuff, like we said. They're going to get food, but they get a lot of diseases, which is why a good portion of the population is lost. So a lot of the indigenous people lose their lives thanks to this discovery of the New World. And it's because the Europeans bring in diseases which the natives do not have any immunities to. It's estimated that at least 60%, some historians will say about 90% of the indigenous population was killed due to the contact with the old world. Okay? So that is a huge loss of life.